Welcome to our takeaway talk for Game Changers. I'm Abigail Summerfield.
And I'm Chantelle Morton. Welcome. We have got such a great evening for you tonight. We are joined by two amazing game changers. Thank you for joining us. We are joined by, let me introduce first, Darcy Laceby. Developed an incredible business, Absolute Collagen, on the family kitchen table. You are from Forbes 30 under 30 e-commerce and Forbes retail. Incredible what you've achieved. You were listed number 4 on the Sunday Times top 100 Britain's fastest growing private companies. And you're 5 years old. Your company's 5 years old. 60% female employees. Incredible. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Jessica Chapplow, welcome, managing partner of Reprise Digital and founder of Heartificial Intelligence. You've worked with brands such as Tiffany, LVMH, Meta, eBay, TikTok, and is this year's Forbes Media Marketing 30 under 30. Incredible. Thank you for joining us this evening. We would like to start off with some questions about your mindset. You're young, you're fearless, you are daring in your approach to your business. Tell us about that.
I'm actually, so we had an investment talk 2 years ago, and you look at kind of your like just how you are as a person, your psychology. I'm actually not a risk taker, which makes absolutely no sense.
She needs
to yeah, I know, to anything. But I started my company with my mum. So she's 50 when she started it, I was 19. She is completely the opposite. So massive risk taker, literally in everything in my childhood life, growing up, crazy times. But yeah, I think we had that really good balance between belief, and I think it's that you never give up, do you? Like, it's always, I think being young, she was 50 and not worked for 25 years, no one really believed in me, and I'm sure you probably kind of had the same at the beginning. You just have to have that relentlessness to not stop and not give up, and if you don't know something, you just got to ask, and if they kind of semi-ignore you, you've got to ask someone else, and not be scared, really.
I think that's a really interesting point, because the whole thing of not being taken seriously, being a young entrepreneur and how have you managed to get around that issue?
I used to really struggle with it, like genuinely. I kind of think it was a me problem, a business society problem really in general, and I think it's people like Jessica out there and the guys on the Forbes list, etc., that are kind of changing the way people are. Now I find it hilarious when I walk into a meeting room and they're like, "Oh, are you the marketing exec?" I'm like, yeah, let's just go with that, it's fine. But now I see it's almost like a superpower, isn't it? They don't really, you get like a clean slate with everyone. Yeah, so it's fine. You've got to prove yourself at the end of the day. Yeah, and you're the only one that could do that.
How about you, Jessica? Have you found it challenging at times, or?
Yeah, I think for me, my risk taking definitely happened earlier on, but it was still very much like after school, between university, and I think, Darcy's incredible, like candor in saying that not a lot of people, I think more people are averse to it, but very few actually admit it as well, because people assume that you're kind of always like carved out or made for it or not. And actually it is something that's honed in terms of like risk taking and being fearless over time. And I always say your opportunities and the way that you build is minimized or maximized by your courage, and that comes through a lot of those areas. I think for me, and similar but from a different side of the coin probably to Darcy, is that I fell into that category of what I call amazingly average, where I wasn't, so everyone's always like, "Oh, what's your IQ? Were you like head girl at school?" And I was like, absolutely not. It was a slow burn, and then I hit the ground running afterwards. But it was something that I was not stupid enough that anyone was like, "Oh, code red, she's dumb." But I also wasn't gifted enough that people were like, "Oh, you're going to Oxbridge, like get ready." So I then found myself in a spot where I had to back myself super early on because no one else was pushing me. And actually that was probably the best part, because I wasn't fully being told all the things that I guess made some people peak at a point where I wanted to peak. Like I would say, and still haven't, but from that standpoint of just really backing myself and honing that fearlessness, in a sense of when I was at the bottom of the food chain in WPP, so a small advertising company, I told myself, like, this is the time to take all the risks now, because you have less budget to play with, you have less responsibility. So the only thing I'm going to be guilty of right now is pushing too hard outside of my comfort zone and not kind of shying away from it, and I didn't regret it too much.
Could you tell us a bit about what you've both been working on recently that might give a really great context to how your brain works and how you kind of work with your teams?
Yeah, kind of as a business point of view.
Yes.
I think we're a very family-run business, like 60% female, 40% under 30. And I don't think we could go into kind of situations as like a normal business. I think we have to do things a little bit differently, and you have to kind of trust your team. But so, for instance, in July, we launched our first TV campaign. And we've just reran it again kind of 3 weeks ago. And there was a couple of things that weren't quite right about it, and we didn't want to kind of put the budget back in like this big marketing agency to kind of redo it, you know, a couple $100,000, like a lot of cost. So we put the faith in our team. So our head senior creative, Sam, who's been with the business for 3 years, kind of similar age to me, has great experience, great mind. And our videographer, Luca, he's awesome. Also, I think he's 22. And kind of put the faith in them to kind of come up with like, guys, what do you think you could do? And they shot it, they color graded it, they came up with the ideas, they ideated it. And we've got a way better conversion from this campaign than the last campaign.
Right.
Saved us a lot of money, but that wasn't actually the point of doing it.
Yeah.
We had a 2-week turnaround to kind of film it. But they love what they do, and they put a lot of effort and they pour their soul into kind of everything. And I think you've got to trust your team massively. I think that's kind of how we're different, I guess. Our brand team also did an away day the other day in someone's house in a field in the middle of nowhere, basically, which, yeah, they had a great time. I heard there was tears, but happy tears. So
That's good. Jessica, tell us what you've been working on.
Favourite one for me at the moment is very unrelated to my full-time job. So I'm building an app at the moment based on, I was at the border of Poland and Ukraine earlier this year. That's a separate podcast, not for today. Okay. But then off the back of that, I'm now building a platform that streamlines crisis response for refugees, aid workers, and everyday volunteers who just want to do extraordinary acts of kindness. And essentially it streamlines those efforts, and it's called Rescued. So this is where all my worlds collide, because it's RESQUED, about removing the Q's from the rescue. So yeah, that's the one that I find in my line of work. It's so corporate, it's working with the largest brands, the biggest, fish in the sea, that actually I tend to find myself gravitating towards the opposite a lot of the times, and finding purpose. When you're in a city like London, in a job like mine, you're always reaching for the next thing, the next promotion, the next pay rise, and it's super easy to forget what it means to reach back. So for me, Rescued is that way of just reminding myself of the purpose beyond, like, job titles are temporary, that they come and go, like whether you're a head of, a chief of, whatever, but purpose is the everlasting thing that that for me is what success is. So Rescued is the small step towards that, hopefully, on the side hustle.
Or front hustle.
Yes, I do say that every side hustle now is a front hustle for me. So I'm going to be positioning it that way.
Can you tell us what you think other people in industry need to do to really encourage their teams to be much more entrepreneurial? You mentioned about your away day and having such a young team, but other kind of, some of our listeners will be saying, well, what can I do to really encourage my team to be more, not fearless, but just be really free with their ideas?
I think it's allowing people to make mistakes, isn't it? And not letting that kind of hold them back. Because we were speaking about it earlier, weren't we? Like, you reach that goal, and then for me, it's like, okay, well, what's the next thing? But they've done something really great. And if you don't reward them for that, or if you don't kind of say, that's a great job, they're not going to kind of reach forward, are they, and kind of do that again. But I think it's about letting people just have that creativity and that flow. And we don't micromanage people. I don't think a lot of people do now anyway. But just definitely allowing them to be themselves at work. We have a lot of, my mum's got ADHD. She keeps diagnosing people at work with ADHD, which you can't do from a HR point of view. But I think allowing people just to be free in what they do, and not kind of, it's not corporate, isn't it? Like, that's not the world we live in anymore. It's definitely not the world we're in. But just allowing people to make mistakes is the biggest thing.
Yeah. Jessica, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, all of that is so poignant and powers a lot of what needs to be done at corporate level and just in any environment, really. I think for me, it's also about tailoring based on the degree of that's all subjective to everyone else. So one person's fearlessness or kind of risk aversion is very different to another. And I think helping people understand that that's okay is definitely the starting point, because I think it's that kind of generalization that when you have bigger teams, kind of saying, you know, let's start being entrepreneurial, what does that even mean? You know, it's so subjective. So for me, it's about how do you distill that down to its purest form that is personal, and then how do you make it into something that actually has purpose? And one of the ways, like then there's like the more hardcore ones. Like for me personally, I think about things like, what's the best platform that's yet to be built, or product that's yet to be built, and like I answer that question for myself like every 3-6 months, and that keeps me honest in terms of like ingenuity in the ways that I like to operate in. But I also think it is about just kind of making entrepreneurialism and that mindset accessible is the starting point for me.
Can you tell us a bit about how you navigate that with your real passion projects, with your day job? How do you kind of navigate that with other people that might not want you to pursue your other front hustles?
Yeah, I think it's about seeking out those people that do want to help you on that journey, and knowing when to cash your chips on the ones that don't, and say that's fine. You don't have to like what I do or even respect it, but then we won't be on the same journey together, and you know, we won't influence each other on that pathway. And I'm really lucky that my company right now, Reprise Digital, they were really receptive to that. And I think I was at the point where it probably comes with the age side, when I was just starting Heartificial and whatnot, I was so quiet about it. I was like, oh, like contractual, there's the legal implications. Well, I'm not saying everyone should just go against your contracts. That's not what I'm recommending. But I was really quiet about it. And then after a few years, I was like, actually, I'm just going to be really transparent that this is my project. This is what my passions are. And it makes me more productive at what I do full time, because I have that renewed sense of focus that is a pipeline between the two worlds. But actually, and the less kind of sexy side is I'm now a stern negotiator, where in my current job, I negotiated to have flexibility to work remotely, to have my own say over like speaking engagements. A lot of corporate companies will often maybe put a mandate on what you can and can't speak at. I tend to self-regulate, as I say, and go after things that personally excite me, but may not be aligned totally to my full-time company. So I think for me, it's about carving out your own path and just surrounding yourself with people that champion it.
How do you celebrate your wins?
Can I say I don't? No, I think that's something I've learned. I've had to, it's again back to the team and the guys. It's like we set goals, and times for 100 was a great example when I got the message like, oh, can I have your email because you're in this list? I was like, amazing, yes. And then it happens and you come fourth and I'm like, oh, could have been second, could have been third. But I think it's like constant like dissatisfaction. I think that's the only reason that drives, you're either driven out of like a positive experience or a negative experience, aren't you? And I think possibly for me it's more negative. And it's born out of like a self-belief, I guess, for me. But I've learned that the other people around you are proud of you, and you need to like let them be proud of you at the end of the day. Otherwise, you just look really grumpy. But yeah, I've started setting goals, and when we reach them, actually go out and actually celebrate and try and be proud, because people are proud of you, and you have to respect that at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's really interesting coming off the back of that is the research that I've done, talking to people who want to start up their own businesses. There's this fear of failure, and what you were talking about, this, you know, I should be at this point. Has there been any projects or businesses that either of you set up in the past that have failed? Is that an experience that you've gone through?
I mean, I want to say like I came out like a phoenix from the ashes. Not really. I think it's about the way your mindset works. So for me, I try and avoid that massively by solving by design and solution design, as opposed to just kind of product first. So when I work with some of these global brands, they're very product first, aren't they? Because that's how they make their money. But for me, I'm like I said, I'm a straddle between engineer and marketeer, as I say, and that for me, the element that keeps me true to success is being a purist of actually what the purpose is and what the solution is we're looking for. And I think that keeps you really focused on actually sustainable success as opposed to just like crash and burn and then kind of figure out. That being said, I think I do believe in what I call like a softer failure, which is just like iteration over time and experimentation. I think that element of it, again, keeps you from failing completely. And that comes from having great teams and a great framework in place.
I think that's good advice. I think it's a good way of looking at it.
Can I just point something out, that women are still often underestimated in business, with a staggering only 2% of women get venture capitalist funding. Can we just talk a bit about that, how you have kind of fought through that to get where you need to be?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think funding wise, I try and be self-fund. Like I try and basically use my full-time funds to be my own like investor shareholder, so I don't have to be beholden to growth targets. You know, so being kind of thrown into that minority as opposed to the majority. But I do think that kind of glass ceiling, personally, I think I've been luckier than some where it hasn't fully held me back. But that's not to say that I haven't encountered it. I mean, I was presenting about artificial intelligence to Toyota when I was 21, and they had 80 of their execs flying in from the Nordics, and I was standing near the entrance and somebody came in and they were like, do you have an extension cable? We were told there was going to be sandwiches. Do you know where the sandwiches are? And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. I was here to speak about AI, but let me check on those sandwiches for you. So yeah, like for me, I think I think, and I'm sure you can relate, Darcy, is being female and being young is probably like the double whammy that hopefully won't persist too much longer, but it's definitely one that I think I actually find I feel the effects of being younger more than I do being a woman or being Asian in business. So that is one that I probably would personally say.
Speaking to someone from NatWest actually, and they said that women don't go for investment as much as men. But I think women are so self-sufficient that you don't really want to ask. It's like, it's your house, isn't it? But so when we started AC, I remember speaking to my mum and she's like, we're going to remortgage the house. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's a lot, isn't it? So we took 120 grand and that's kind of how we started the business. We're fairly cash generative, and then we took investment in 2 years ago, mainly for sort of the experience they brought on board. But I think yes, women don't get the funding, but I don't think women like to put themselves out there either and ask, because we're so genuinely so self-sufficient. But I think it's becoming more like the Alison Rose report with NatWest. I'm not sure if you know about that. It was all about women in investment and business, but that's doing incredible things. But I think there's such a long way to go.
In terms of being young, let's talk about that. We know that big companies who have now called shadow boards, that have a younger board of directors, they're not board of directors, they're shadow boards, but the ones who have embraced the young mindset are really benefiting. Tell us about that. Darcy, you said about your company is very young. Tell us how that you think the impact of that is positive for you as a business.
Oh, hugely. I think, especially when we're talking about like ESG, sustainability, the young people, I'm one of those people, the younger people really want to push that forward. They want to do things differently. They don't want to sit back and let whatever it is, but they kind of see round solutions, I think, and kind of pose a new way of looking at things, new ideas, new ways of working, even like COVID, and that's brought us. Before COVID, we had a lot of our employees that were already asking for flexible working, and only the young people, even though there's a lot of people within our company with kids as well. We had them in the office the other week, which is really strange. But no, it's just, I think it's that new mindset, that fresh mindset, and just being able to, I think it's the risk taker thing as well. They don't have as much to possibly, like you're saying, when you were younger, you wanted to be more of a risk taker in your job, but they don't really have as much responsibility as well. So I think they can afford to be a bit more ballsy in kind of decisions.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yes, it's super similar. I'd say there's elements of that, like where you just want to be cultivating like a culture that people feel heard. And I think some of it, like I always say, like you're never too young to lead, you're never too old to learn. And I think that also doesn't alienate people who do have a lot of experience, and it is about fusing the best of both, because ultimately, you know, there are, I like to call them sometimes blinder spots that you do have when you haven't been in an industry for decades. So being able to just marry those two different sides of the coin up is the best part. But I definitely see, like, having younger teams, like, there is a sense of like hunger and desire to do things differently and brilliantly that it comes with, I think, just being fresh out of uni and not, I find it fascinating that people don't teach you to take all of those risks, like when you don't have responsibility and instead you're told to be the smallest voice in the room and, you know, wait till it's your turn to speak. And actually it should be the opposite, because there's so much fresh thinking and perspective that is so powerful compared to people who are almost part of the furniture. Like that is the worry when you have people who've been in it for so long. And you don't have to be old for that either. Like sometimes I feel like I've been in marketing so long that I'm part of the furniture, isn't it part of industry furniture as opposed to the companies, because I move around. But you become jaded and cynical in ways that hinder that progress from really being made.
Yeah. And then thinking about the future, have you guys ever written like a vision board? How do you figure where your goal is going to be? Do you manifest it? Do you write it? Or does it just happen organically? What's your process?
I don't, so you
So I used to not do it either as well. I had a lot of American friends, no offense to if anyone's American in the room, but they were always like, manifest it, girl, like you got this. And I was like, whoa, no, that's culturally not really where I'm aligned. But then I started doing it my way, which is that I now have a notebook where I half it down the middle, and I call one section dreaming and I call the other section scheming. And dreaming is all for the moonshots, and it's all for the kind of things that I'm like, oh, if I had all like the money in the world or all the brains in the world, this is what I would be accomplishing. And it's kind of like 3 years maybe down the line, like a year at the quickest. And the scheming part is like the very short-term wins that you're just like, yes, I can probably churn these out and get some sort of like instant gratification. But what I thought was super interesting when I did this exercise, unintentionally learned from it, was I didn't realize how many things when I went to like 6 months or a year down the line, at the end of the year, like New Year comes up and it's a good time, was how many things I'd got not really achieved in dreaming, but I'd got so close to achieving that I was like, whoa, these are the things that were my moonshots. And I might not have landed on the moon, but it's like that phrase, you know, shoot for the moon, and if you miss, at least you land among the stars. And I was like, I landed among the stars on so many things. And that kept me actually also celebrating the small things as well, and the wins, because I celebrated the journey as opposed to the destination.
Lovely.
I mean, Absolute Collagen's given me, I'm way ahead of where I thought it would be now. I've always like been very kind of work focused and work driven, but I've got further than I wanted to in kind of a career and stuff. And I think for me, it's just about trying to appreciate when like living in the moment, because you've set your business goals, or like we've just bought a house with my partner and we're doing that at the moment. Then when the moment comes, it goes like that, doesn't it? Yeah. So I don't tend to set goals, but the past 5 years has gone very quickly. So.
Guys, thank you so much for sharing your brain power with us and your ideas, and for sharing your successes and how you work. It's been really, really fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much.
This is fun.